Margaret Molly Brown was an American socialite, philanthropist, and activist who became famous because of her survival of the 1912 sinking of the RMS Titanic, after exhorting the crew of Lifeboat No. 6 to return to look for survivors. It is unclear whether any survivors were found after Lifeboat No. 6 returned to search. She became known after her death as the Unsinkable Molly Brown, although during her life, her friends called her Maggie. A 1960 Broadway musical based on her life was produced, along with a 1964 film adaptation of the musical. Both were titled The Unsinkable Molly Brown. Early life: born Margaret Tobin in Hannibal, Missouri on what is now known as Dinkler's Alley, her parents were Irish Roman Catholic immigrants John Tobin and Johanna Collins. Her siblings were Daniel, William, and Helen. Added to these, Margaret had two half-sisters, Catherine Bridget Tobin, by her father's first marriage, and Mary Ann Collins, by her mother's first marriage. Both her mother and father had been widowed young. At age 18, Margaret relocated to Leadville, Colorado with her brother Daniel, where she found a job in a department store. In Leadville she met and married James Joseph Brown, nicknamed J.J., an enterprising, self-educated man. His parents, too, had emigrated from Ireland. Brown had always planned to marry a rich man, but she married J.J. for love. She said, "I wanted a rich man, but I loved Jim Brown. I thought about how I wanted comfort for my father and how I had determined to stay single until a man presented himself who could give to the tired old man the things I longed for him. Jim was as poor as we were, and had no better chance in life. I struggled hard with myself in those days. I loved Jim, but he was poor. Finally, I decided that I'd be better off with a poor man whom I loved than with a wealthy one whose money had attracted me. So I married Jim Brown." Margaret and J.J. were married in Leadville's Annunciation Church on September 1, 1886. The Browns had two children. Lawrence Palmer Brown was born on August 30, 1887 in Hannibal, Missouri. He married Hannah Elizabeth Horton on January 1, 1911 in Kansas City, Missouri. They had two children, Lawrence Palmer Pat Brown, Jr. and Eileen Elizabeth Betty Brown. The marriage failed and Larry married Mildred Gregory on November 17, 1926 in Beverly Hills, California. This marriage produced no other children. Larry died on April 2, 1949. Catherine Ellen Brown was born on July 22, 1889 in Leadville, Colorado. She married George Joseph Peter Adelheid Beanziger on April 7, 1913 in Chicago, Illinois. Her children were James George Beanziger and George Peter Joseph Adelric Beanziger. Her grandchildren include Catherine Beanziger and Vincent Beanziger. Helen died in 1969. The Brown family acquired great wealth when J.J.'s mining engineering efforts proved instrumental in the production of a substantial ore seam at the Little Johnny mine of his employers, Ibex Mining Company, and he was awarded 12,500 shares of stock and a seat on the board. In Leadville, Margaret helped by working in soup kitchens to assist miners' families. In 1894, the Browns moved to Denver, Colorado, which gave the family more social opportunities. Margaret became a charter member of the Denver Women's Club, whose mission was the improvement of women's lives by continuing education and philanthropy. Adjusting to the trappings of a society lady, Brown became well immersed in the arts and fluent in French, German, and Italian. Brown co-founded a branch in Denver of the Alliance for Intersectionaires to promote her love of French culture. After 23 years of marriage, Margaret and J.J. privately signed a separation agreement in 1909. Although they never reconciled, they continued to communicate and cared for each other throughout their lives. The agreement gave Margaret a cash settlement and she maintained possession of the house on Pennsylvania Street in Denver. She also received a $700 monthly allowance to continue her travels and social work. Margaret assisted in the fundraising for Denver's Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, which was completed in 1911. Margaret worked with Judge Lindsay to help destitute children and establish the United States' first juvenile court, which helped form the basis of the modern U.S. juvenile court system. Margaret ran for Senate again in 1914 but ended her campaign to return to France to work with the American Committee for Devastated France during WWI. Passenger on the Titanic. Margaret was conveyed to the passenger liner RMS Titanic as a first-class passenger aboard the tender SS Nomadic at Cherbourg, France. The Titanic sank early on April 15, 1912, at around 2:20 a.m. after striking an iceberg at around 11:40 the night before. Margaret helped others board the lifeboats, but was finally convinced to leave the ship in Lifeboat No. 6. Brown was later called the Unsinkable Molly Brown by authors because she helped in the ship's evacuation, taking an oar herself in her lifeboat and urging that the lifeboat to go back and save more people. Her urgings were met with opposition from Quartermaster Robert Hickens, the crewman in charge of Lifeboat 6. Hickens was fearful that if they did go back, the lifeboat would either be pulled down due to suction or the people in the water would swamp the boat in an effort to get inside. Sources vary as to whether the boat did go back and if they found anyone alive when they did. Later life. At the time of J.J. Brown's death on September 5, 1922, Margaret told newspapers, "I've never met a finer, bigger, more worthwhile man than J.J. Brown." J.J. died without a will and it required 5 years of disputation between Brown and her 2 children finally to settle the estate. Due to their lavish spending, J.J. left an estate valued at only $238,000, equal to $3,353,292 today. Maggie was to receive $20,000 in cash and securities, and the interest on a $100,000 trust fund in her name. Her children, Lawrence and Helen, received the rest. A court case against Helen and Lawrence was settled privately and Margaret and her children were reconciled at the time of her death in 1932. Her fame as a well-known Titanic survivor helped her promote the issues she felt strongly about: the rights of workers and women, education and literacy for children, historic preservation, and commemoration of the bravery and chivalry displayed by the men aboard the Titanic. During World War I in France, she worked with the American Committee for Devastated France to rebuild areas behind the front line and helped wounded French and American soldiers. She was awarded the French Legion of Honor for her good citizenship, including her activism and philanthropy in America. During the last years of her life, she was an actress. After she died in 1932, her 2 children sold her estate for $6,000, equal to $109,311 today. She is buried in the Cemetery of the Holy Rood in Westbury, New York. Portrayals, Thelma Ritter. Margaret Brown's name was changed to Maud Young, and her Colorado silver mining fortune became a Montana lead mining fortune. Cloris Leachman, Tucker Maguire, Tammy Grimes. Grimes won a Tony Award for her performance. Debbie Reynolds. Reynolds received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Cloris Leachman, Fionnuala Flanagan, Marilu Henner, Kathy Bates, Morgan Hill, Judy Preston-Inzee, Linda Cash, Rosalind Blessed, Deborah Jean Templin. See also Molly Brown House, Notes. External links: Margaret Brown on Titanic-Titanic.com, Margaret Brown Death Certificate on Titanic-Titanic.com, List of passengers and crew of RMS Titanic, Margaret Brown at Find a Grave, Molly Brown House Museum, Denver, book, Molly Brown, Unraveling the Myth, 1920 passport photo of Margaret Molly Brown.